Welcome to Rich Planet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. This week's guest is an expert in a subject you will not learn about in any school or university. You might see references to this subject in popular culture and in second-rate Hollywood movies such as The Men Who Stare at Goats. It is an area of research which dodgy organizations such as the CIA have been meddling with for decades, and has remained largely hidden from public view due to the utterly shocking nature of their alleged programs of research. The subject is that of mind control, and here to talk about it, yet again, it's Neil Saunders. Welcome, Neil.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Very well.
Good.
Now then, Neil, you've been on the show, what, 3 times before?
3 or 4,
3 or 4, yeah. Yeah, you were on with Ian Crane, of course.
Yeah.
Now, the mainstream media have covered mind control. There was a BBC4 programme called The Brain, A Secret History with Dr. Michael Mosley. So everything in that obviously must be true because he's a doctor.
I mean, one of the things I want to sort of say immediately is that all of this stuff, it's all available in the public eye. You know, a lot of it's from declassified documents, a lot of it's from people boasting about their own prowess, and that's where we're sort of coming from. We're looking at the people themselves that have done these experiments, admitting that they've done these experiments.
Okay. Now, I'll just read a little bit from this was the BBC made a programme about mind control, and it says, in a compelling and at times disturbing series, Dr. Michael Mosley explores the brutal history of experimental psychology. To begin, Michael traces the sinister ways this science has been used to try to control our minds. He finds that the pursuit of mind control has led to some truly horrific experiments, left many casualties in its wake. Extraordinary archive captures what happened. Scientists systematically changed the behaviour of children. Law-abiding citizens were given fatal electric shocks. A gay man has electrodes implanted in his head, etc., etc. So, is this not the mainstream coming clean with this subject, Neil?
Well, sort of. I mean, the thing is that it's that extensive that to an extent they have to come clean with it because there's no denying it. But what they'll do is they'll present it in such a way that says, wow, look at this that we used to do. Look at the way that we used to believe. I mean, obviously we wouldn't be so cruel and so callous as to do this sort of experimentation now.
Right.
And they'll use an excuse like, well, you've got to appreciate that at the time it was the Cold War, and so, you know, anything goes. And then the classic one, which is always used, is, to be honest, we never fully achieved any of our aims anyway. And you know, just by going through the actual evidence, you can see that both those statements aren't true.
So that they will admit some of the horrific things that were done, but they'll say, well, nothing really came of it, and that was dodgy things in the past.
Or alternatively, they'll spin it in such a way. For example, you know, we were talking about Ewan Cameron and William Sargent, and basically what they're doing is they're wiping people's minds. Now, this is sold as a therapeutic method of getting rid of harmful patterns like alcoholism or depression or postpartum depression and stuff like that. So again, this isn't torture. No, this is nothing sinister. This is a therapeutic method.
Okay, now you would contend that they're ploughing ahead with these mind control research as much as they ever were.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In
Right.
fact, some of the, like as we'll discuss later in the show, some of the actual technology is now sort of widely available. Commercial companies sell these things.
Right. All right. Well, we'll come on to that. Now, you sent me an email, Neil, of the things that you wanted to discuss, and it's frankly it boggles the mind, right? And it is about boggling the mind, right? Okay. So tell us first about this guy John Lilly. Who's he?
Well, John Lilly, he was essentially a psychiatrist, and he was the first person to actually map the electrical patterns of the brain.
What year we're talking?
Well, he did this in 1951, and by sort of seeing the electrical stimulation and processes in the brain, we could denote this is the pleasure centre, this is the pain centre, this is the area that controls shame and guilt and such like that, and we can see how the electrons fire. Because essentially what you've got to realise is that every action that you do, every thought process, everything that you do, it starts off with an electrical stimulation from the brain. It's a very small one, But this is the area that the scientists sort of got interested in, because if we can replicate or mimic or sort of get in front of that stimulation, we can recreate that, and we can therefore cause the appropriate reaction. I mean, John Lilly, he basically proved that electrical stimulation in specific areas of the brain can give you either an intensely punishing or an intensely rewarding experience. And one of the things that he said was, at any time an adult human being can be reduced to a childish level, such a state can be induced by lack of sleep, by starvation, by torture, by isolation, by profound confinement, by drugs, or by direct electrical stimulation. An adult can be forced to learn by means almost thoroughly beyond his control, and I'm speaking here of powerful means used ruthlessly with few scruples. One of the things that John Lilly was able to do was he was able to one of the first people to implant electrodes into the brain, and what these electrodes would do would basically cause this electrical stimulation that would fire off emotions or somatic movements or whatever. The important thing about this was in 1953, and he describes this. The process required no anaesthesia, and it was practically undetectable. I mean, he describes.
So would there be a hole drilled into the skull through?
Well, what he says is electrodes can be implanted in the brain without using anaesthesia. During the process of implantation, there was no more pain than that of a needle prick in the scalp. Short lengths of hypodermic needle tubing, equal in length to the thickness of the skull, were quickly pounded through the scalp into the skull. These stainless steel guides furnished passageways for the insertion of electrodes into the brain to any desired distance. Because of the small size of the sleeve guides, the scalp quickly recovered from the small hole made in it, and the sleeve guide remained embedded in the bone for months to years. At any time he desired, the investigator could palpate the scalp, find the location of each of the sleeve guides. Once one was found, he inserted a needle down through the bone, and after withdrawing the needle, the investigator placed a small, sharp electrode in the track made by the needle.
Right.
And yeah, this was basically, the whole point of this was in 1953 this can be done without anaesthetic, so it doesn't require a complicated neurological process. Essentially anybody could be trained to do it in the same way that you could train someone to do any plant pressing machine or something.
So what sort of things could those electrodes make somebody do or feel or?
Well, I mean, essentially what they could do is they could affect all of the processes, normal processes of the brain. So you can affect emotions, you can affect actions, you can affect desires, you can affect thought processes. I mean, what John Lilly was actually doing was basically purely concentrating on pain and pleasure as a reward stimulus. But even by doing that, I suppose, you know, you could soon train somebody in a behavioural science way that if you do this, you feel bad. If you do this, you feel good. One of the things was, essentially John Lilly said that he refused to work for the CIA and the FBI. And he gave his reasons, but I'm not sure about this. He was approached by the director of the National Institute of Mental Health and asked to present all his findings to the CIA, the NSA and the FBI. And he refused, saying, Dr. Antoine Remond, using our techniques in Paris, has already demonstrated that this method of stimulation of the brain can be applied to the human without the help of a neurosurgeon. And now this means that anyone with the proper apparatus can carry this out on a person covertly, with no external signs that electrodes have been used on that person. If this technique got into the hands of a security agency, they would have control over a human being and be able to change his beliefs extremely quickly, leaving little evidence of what they had done.
So was Lilly experimenting with hardwired electrodes, or was there any remote control?
No, these are remote. These are remote that have been left in.
This is in the 1950s?
Yeah, in the 1950s.
So what kind of radio signal would they be triggered with?
I'm not sure whether it was a microwave or extremely low frequency magnetic wave, or I'm not entirely sure, but that was all that was required. It was essentially, I mean, he sort of honed his craft on dolphins at Marineland. Him and a group of other scientists would basically using these dolphins as experimental subjects. The thing that strikes me is that John Lilly apparently refused to work for the CIA, FBI, etc. However, a year later, in 1954, he actually took a job for the National Institute of Mental Health. So he wasn't that upset by it, essentially. He was also the person that invented the isolation tank. And we've spoke before about how an isolation tank is a very, very simple method of inducing torture. What you can do is you keep somebody in an isolation tank, because obviously they've got no stimulus, the brain starts to fill in the blanks, and very, very soon you'll start to experience hallucinations that are akin to mescaline.
Right.
And again, this was discovered very early on in the MK
So
Ultra
what does
project.
an isolation tank do? Just explain that for the
Well,
viewers.
essentially, it's just a darkened coffin type thing where you've got no light, no outside noise, it's soundproofed, and you're left to float in water, in warm water, so it's body temperature.
Right.
And after a while, you get the sensation of being disconnected from your body. And again,
Right.
this is like a new age therapy. You
Is
can
it?
probably go and
Right.
find one in your local town where you can go and have a session for half an hour.
Right.
But initially, it was used for torture.
Right. Okay. Now, what's MK Ultra, which is the mind control broad project name?
Yeah, it's the
for
umbrella
CIA.
term, yeah.
Project number 94.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, I mean, this is of 149 known sub-projects.
Right.
Basically, sub-project 94, it seems to be sort of connected from Lilly and then going on to Jose Delgado. It involved the utilisation of electrodes or some sort of implant to turn animals into remote control devices. Essentially what it was doing was controlling the behaviour of the animals, inducing aggression or sending them to sleep or whatever, but also using them as an espionage device. This was dated 1961, November the 2nd. This describes the purpose. Miniaturised stimulating electrode implants in specific brain centre areas will be utilised. The feasibility of remote control of activities in several species of animal has been demonstrated. The present investigations are directed towards improvement of techniques and will provide precise mapping of the useful brain centres. The ultimate objective in this research is to provide an understanding of the mechanisms involved in the directional control of animals and to provide practical systems suitable for deleted application. I couldn't possibly say, but if I was to speculate, I'd suggest that is for human application.
Right, so it says the word deleted in that. Is that like
That's been blanked
a
out.
release document's been blanked out,
Yeah.
but you think that means in human applications?
Yeah, I mean, in 1961, they were already saying, at the present time, we feel that we are close to having debugged a prototype system whereby dogs can be guided along specific courses through land areas out of sight and at some distance of the operator. In addition to this, its possible practical value in operations, the phenomenon is a very useful research tool in the area of behavioural sciences. Doctor, deleted, is taking appropriate action to exploit our knowledge of this area and provide adequate background for the development of future agency applications in the general areas of influencing human behaviour, indirect assessment and interrogation aids.
Right. So you tell me about this cat that they were using as an espionage device.
Yeah.
So they had like a joystick and they could just
Essentially, I mean, it was called.
I shouldn't laugh, you know. It's really
It's
cruel,
monstrous,
isn't it?
but you know, it's.
With the animal rights people watching this.
It was
I
called the
shouldn't laugh.
Acoustic Kitty, and I mean, it was tested. Well, work began in 1961, so
Yeah.
we can assume that it's connected to Sub-Project 94. Basically, it was an ex-CIA agent called Victor Marchetti. He actually sort of told people about it, and what they did was they got this cat, normal house cat, split it open, fitted sort of mechanisms on its joints so that they could make it move as they desired, turned it essentially into a robotic remote-controlled toy. They stuffed its brain full of microphones so that it could be like a portable tape recorder and pick up conversations or whatever. And they used its tail as an antenna. What happened was, you know, this took 5 years, $15 million worth of planning. And they took it out to Wisconsin Avenue in Washington, D.C. And this is the culmination of many, many years and millions of dollars worth of studies. They spoke to the cat, they basically programmed it. It says, you're going to go over there, and you're going to speak to those, you're going to listen to those two guys, you're going to ignore all that, you're going to ignore all that, you're just going to go over there. Held the breath, opened the door, tentatively got the cat straight out, waited, crossed the road, hit by a taxi straight away. $15 million worth of research under a tyre.
Well, now what about DARPA? Where does that come into this?
Well, DARPA have got this this project that is an extension of Jose Delgado's work. Now, Jose Delgado, we spoke about him before. He was the guy that basically managed to stop a bull in its track by the use of an implant, which is called a stymosiever. And these work in exactly in a similar sort of way. The electrical stimulation causes basically, you know, flexion of muscles or whatever. It's something that you cannot avoid. Now, he was particularly interested in trying to robotize humans, trying to get people to the point where they didn't know that they were actually being controlled, and he felt that this was good for society in a sort of Malthusian way. You know, we're all the cells, and it's only the organism that's there. And basically, he said, With knowledge of the brain, we may transform, we may shape, direct and robotize man. I think the great danger of the future is that we will have robotized humans who are not aware that they have been robotized. And he works for the office, well he works at Yale, but he was financed by the Office of Naval Research. Now, in 1966, what he was saying was that his experiments supported the distasteful conclusion that motion, emotion and behaviour can be directed by electrical forces, and that humans can be controlled like robots by push buttons. Okay, and he actually detailed a lot of this in his book, which was in 1969 called The Physical Control of the Mind Towards a Psycho-Civilized Society. And in that, again, he goes on to say, movements, sensations, emotions, desires, ideas and a variety of psychological phenomena may be induced, inhibited or modified by electrical stimulation of the brain. Automatic and somatic functions, individual and social behaviours, emotional and mental reactions may be evoked, maintained, modified or inhibited, both in animals and in man, by electrical stimulation of specific cerebral structures. Physical control of many brain functions is a demonstrated fact. It is even possible to follow intentions, the development of thoughts and visual experiences. Now, the connection to DARPA is...
So what, follow, you mean, so it's feeding back information as to what the
at the end
animal or person is thinking,
feeling. At the end of his career, he was able to basically create what was called a two-way stymoseiver, and this is an implant...
Say that word again, Neil.
A stymoseiver.
Stymoseiver.
Yeah, S-T-I-M-O-C-E-I-V-E-R.
And that's a bit like a transceiver, is it?
Well, it's just his name for his particular type of implant, and, and at the end of his career...
How big would that be?
Tiny, tiny.
Smaller than a grain of rice?
They got progressively smaller and more complex as he moved on. Initially, he had to have a wire going into the brain of, it was monkeys that he initially started off. Then you've got the bull, which was obviously remote control, but only had one function. By the end of his career, what he was able to do was create stymosevers that could talk back to computers that were directing the project.
Two-way communication.
Two-way communication, and by that you can track and you can basically, essentially what you're saying is you can tell what somebody's going to do before they do it by the initial electrical stimulation that the brain starts up.
Right. Okay.
Okay, and he was able to show this in his experiments in Gibraltar on gibbons, essentially. And what he was able to show was that he can send monkeys to sleep, make them yawn or fight or play.
He got this group of gibbons, and he fitted them all with
stymosevers or
multiple. Is it stymoseiver?
Stymoseiver.
With multiple stymosevers in their brains.
And basically,
and all of these monkeys in the same group
islands,
had them.
And he experimented to see what he could do. So he would basically, turn some of them into vegetables, raise up a certain side of them, make this side attack this side, make this side want to go to bed with that side, make them all fall asleep. Eventually, he started giving these monkeys their own buttons. So basically, what would happen is if one of them is particularly aggressive, another one could go, oh, I'll put a stop to this, press the button, and that monkey would go to sleep. And what this proved is that electrical stimulation, he said, it does not simply evoke automatic responses, but the reactions that become integrated into the social behaviour according to the individual's own personality or temperament. So what it is it's basically like training somebody. It's a behavioural sciencing so that people become used to this electronic stimulation. And
so if you were to electronically stimulate a human being in that way, using an implant with a microwave or ELF, would that person know that it was from an outside influence or not? Or would they just think that they've thought it themselves?
Well, this is the thing. Some of them, it's very apparent, some of them don't, because you wouldn't think because it's an internal structure. So this is the way that you can change personality. I mean, one of his experiments, what he was doing was finding that electrical stimulation meant that essentially you could change the sexual orientation of people's brains. He was doing it on an 11-year-old boy. And well, the connection, as I was saying, the connection to DARPA is the fact that basically he spoke in front of, he was never shy about telling people what he felt, and he spoke in front of the Congress in 1974, and he said, we need a program of psychosurgery for political control of our society, and the purpose is physical control of the mind. Anyone who deviates from the norm can and should be surgically mutilated. Man does not have the right to develop his own mind. This kind of liberal orientation has great appeal. We must electrically control the brain. Someday, armies and generals will be controlled by electrical stimulation of the brain. Oh, well, guess what?
Right, and then you think they are, well, some soldiers already have been implanted and are being controlled. But we'll come on to that, Neil.
Yes.
We're going to go for a quick break because there's a few questions after this that I want to ask about these gibbons.